Hello and good evening. Welcome to another episode of Between the Presets, a podcast by me, Rudy Stetner, that comes out every Monday evening. Here is the place where anything that can be said in polite company is fair game for discussion, even if it occasionally offends. Let's roll. Hello. It is Monday evening, the 26th of Sivan, 5784. On the civil calendar, that is the 1st of July, 2024. It's a big week this week. It's the 4th of July coming up on Thursday, and that's an excellent time to reflect upon and to discuss where America has been and where it is going. There are a lot of concepts which were developed in the United States of America and exported abroad. Some of the early colonies were religious places of refuge. The state of Maryland was, for instance, a Catholic refuge founded by Catholics. Pennsylvania was established by Quakers. And then, of course, Massachusetts was established by Puritans. And yet we evolved a constitution in which a person was protected by separation of church and state, which has been misinterpreted over the years. But what it basically meant was that the state, the federal or local government, could not officially favor or prefer one religious denomination over another. Some of the founding fathers were against slavery. Some owned slaves, but that great moral battle played itself out in the newly established United States of America. There were actually immigrants, Germany comes to mind, who came to the United States shortly before and during the Civil War and fought on the Union side, the northern side, against slavery and for abolition of slavery. The idea of that a person could rise or fall based on their achievements rather than be born into a class to which they were chained for the rest of their natural lives. This had a lot of resonance in the world at that time. I think it's worth noting that while we do have the separation of religion and state in this country, that people still have an attachment to their religious traditions. And I would maintain that it is the civic duty of each and every individual to draw upon their belief in a creator and the ongoing guidance of the creator in the exercise of their civic duties. There is a human tendency to game the system, to put one's personal gain first and the needs of one's neighbors and society at large second. For a legal system to work, there needs to be social conventions and religious ethical beliefs that have been internalized by the people. In order for an individual to be governed, they must govern themselves. We seem to have moved away from this realization. Years ago, when I was shopping for Bollywood movies, I had a very interesting experience. There is a Pakistani neighborhood, Indian also, in a part of Brooklyn that I frequently pass through but don't usually stop in. But it's a good place to buy Bollywood movies. On a world scale, Bollywood movies, that is to say movies made in India, are a lot more popular than Hollywood. These films have a much more stringent and also graceful code of modesty than do Western movies. They emphasize traditional relationships. People who are living in societies that are bound by traditions feel much more included in the world of Bollywood than they do in the world of Hollywood. So I was in this Pakistani neighborhood on Coney Island Avenue, and I was on my way to buy a couple of Bollywood movies to play for my children. And I saw that there was a lot of hustle and bustle around the mosque there. And I asked somebody what it was. I think they said it was Muhammad's birthday. And that was, cause for a big celebration. I could tell it was a holiday because of how people were dressed. So I walked by, and there was some little kids about 10 years old. They look at me and look at how I'm dressed, and one of them says, "Hey, there's a Jew." "Hey, Jew." One of the other ones says, "Jew, get out of here." So these kids were too young to be out by themselves. And I looked at a kid who looked a little bit older, maybe 15 or 16, who was with them. And I said, "We don't play that way here. You had a civil war in your country. Do you want the United States to be like India and Pakistan were during the time they were partitioned?" Now, I was referring to the events of 1947, when India got its independence from Britain, and Pakistan, and what is today Bangladesh, broke off to form a Muslim part of India. Thousands and thousands of people were killed, as people were, in many cases, forced to leave Pakistan for India or India for Pakistan. And it was a very tragic time in the history of India and Pakistan. The older kid, he knew what I was talking about. He looked at me and he says, "Okay, yeah, you're right, I'm sorry." And he said something to the younger kids, and it wasn't in English. It was like in, I'm guessing, Urdu or something like that. And things quieted down. I went on to buy my Bollywood movies, and they went on to a celebration of their prophet's birthday that was not marred by displays of hatred. People who come to the United States fleeing turbulence in their homelands know about civil war. Many of them know about totalitarian forms of government, such as immigrants from the former Soviet Union, a lot of people who come in from China, and we in turn should as well learn from the people who come to our shores. America has embarked on a unique path. The idea of a meritocracy, a republic form of government rather than a monarchy, although it is not the only form of governance that can work, it is definitely a civic path that has a lot to teach the world, whatever path they choose. That being said, I think one of the biggest mistakes America made abroad was in seeking to abolish monarchies and to export America's system of government to countries which have long experiences with other traditions. One of the advantages of a monarchy is that you can have somebody like some place like the Austro-Hungarian Empire or the Ottoman Empire, and there is the potential, not always realized, that people of different languages and faiths and cultures can maintain their individuality and yet be part of something greater, have a unity that extends beyond the relatively tiny city-states of old times, and to create an empire that works together harmoniously. Of course, tragically, this hope is not always realized. It's not always realized in republic form of government, and it's not always realized in a monarchy. There are lessons that I learn shopping that are easily transferable to political discourse. Let me explain. We are used to brand names, company names. For instance, Coca-Cola and Pepsi have their distinct tastes. There are cookies that have their tastes and whatnot. And we shop for the brands that have earned our loyalty based upon our experience as satisfied customers. In actual point of fact, some of the things aside from the brand names and the logos are far more important. I have people in my family who have to watch their sugar. I have to watch my sugar. I have to watch my salt. There are people in my family with milk and nut allergies. The labels on the product we buy are very important for establishing that something is both healthy and even safe to consume. Sometimes this isn't a life and death matter, but sometimes I will develop a loyalty to a brand of beer. And I remember, I don't want to mention names, but one beer that I had really enjoyed was just a little too gassy for my comfort. Just had way too much bubbles in it. I like a certain level of effervescence in the beverages I consume, but not too much. One of my friends who keeps a close eye on the world of beer pointed out that this particular brand had slipped rice into the formula. And that's, I guess, a cheaper way of producing beer. And if you're not that critical about the taste, then the producers can get away with it. My mother noted the same thing with 7-Up. Used to be many years ago that sodas were made with cane sugar. If you look today, the vast majority of sodas are made with corn syrup. It's a very cheap, almost junky way of introducing sweetness into a carbonated beverage, or lots of different types of food. But it's a recurring theme in consumer goods. The brand name is the same, but the quality has changed. And the same thing has happened in the political world. Labels are not as descriptive as they should be. Sometimes ingredients are substituted while the logo remains the same. To be even more specific, our two big labels in the United States of America, political labels, are Democrat and Republican. The Democrat Party actually started off being openly pro-slavery, and yet it succeeded in presenting itself as the party of the working class, the defender of workers' interests. The Republican Party, of course, started off as the party of Abraham Lincoln. In some parts of the country, it is a very conservative brand name, if you will, and in other parts of the country, such as Massachusetts, it tends to be on the more liberal end of things. It should be noted, by the way, that a lot of the judges who laid out the legal framework for civil rights in the United States for civic racial equality were in fact Republican judges. But there's another label, it's a little bit more international, and that is labels such as liberal and conservative and extreme right, extreme left. It's very tempting for people to, as they're in the supermarket of politics, to put back a can that has been stamped ultra-right, ultra-left, or some other label that they find off-putting. Europe has issues with its borders. The European Union has greatly weakened borders between member states, and they have some issues that could be compared to what the United States has experienced. America has thrown open its southern border. It used to be that securing the borders of one's country, having a common language that held the country together, that these were perfectly acceptable things. Now you have people who say secure the border being labeled extreme right. These are ideas which 20, 25 years ago were perfectly acceptable and did not put one at the edge of polite society. I once had an experience where an otherwise excellent social studies teacher, when she was refuted, I brought up, I was 12 years old, what did I know? The idea of a planned economy, of producing what people need instead of creating needs and stuff like that. And she said, planned economy, she says, that's socialism. Now, that was a case, slapping a label on something and closing the discussion with it. It was one of very, very few mistakes she made in teaching. But we're all human, and we should try to avoid doing that. Describe what ideas are and where they can lead. Weigh ideas on their merits instead of slapping them and each other with dismissive label. We have people in this country who are somewhat hysterical in dealing with Trump supporters. And then you have a party that's been labeled extreme right in France that's made some considerable inroads. They had an electoral victory in France, and I'm talking about Marine Le Pen's National Front Party. And like it or not, it used to be that the more conservative political parties in France and Germany, I'm a little bit more familiar with Germany's political parties, championed the ideas that have become since then the domain of the so-called far right. Labels do have their place. There are countries that have had a high degree of illiteracy, and the only way you can get an illiterate person to vote is to have a logo that attracts their attention. I used to work with Haitian people, and I had a coworker who was very fond of a guy named Jean-Bertrand Aristide. He was Haitian president for a while, and the logo for his party was a rooster. So if you saw a place on the ballot where there was a rooster, you knew that you could make a mark there, and that was your man. And other parties had other logos as well. And India has done the same thing. And when I was in Italy, I saw that each party had its logo. There was, of course, the hammer and sickle of the Communist Party, and the MSI, Movimento Sociale Italiano, had its very distinct logo. They were the neo-fascists. The Social Democrat Party, which was one of the smaller ones, had a rising sun on its logo. But sooner or later, We have to get beyond the logo, and we have to get beyond the brand name and the label, and we have to discuss ideas and solutions and which ones will address all of the issues that we believe need to be addressed. So coming up this week, I wish you all a happy and blessed July 4th. I think the wisdom needed to move this country forward and to move the world forward is there for those of us who are honest enough with ourselves to draw upon it. You all have a blessed week. This wraps up another weekly episode of Between the Presets. I thank you all for the pleasure of sharing with me my weekly muse. Whatever platform you access, hitting like, subscribe, or leaving a comment is much appreciated. My email address is thewinterriders@gmail.com. thewinterriders@gmail.com. Until next week, adio, which in some African languages means born on Monday or be righteous, and closely resembles adios in Spanish.